Hey there. So I just wanted to vent a bit today. I've already vented about this a bit, but I figured I would just come here and vent about it. Um, it can help me to just debate something kind of just on my own or something, or at least have it understood why I feel this way, how I feel this way, what I feel. Um, because otherwise it's pretty futile in this instance. So I just got off the phone with the Wyoming department that deals with, changing your birth certificate designation. And she had to call me to inform me that we're not changing your gender designation, which I already expected they would do that because I looked into the laws and everything. Um, I mean, it's nothing personal with the lady I was on the phone with or anything. She's just doing her job. It's the state of Wyoming. It's the people that voted for it to be that way in the state. It's the lawmakers that push for it to be that way that I have problems with. So while it is people, I just want to be clear, like I can be clear. There is clarity here, that I'm not just trying to be wrathful in my anger or just upset at everyone involved or anything. I just want that to be clear to whoever is listening. She did say on the phone, she did ask me if I wanted to, given that I can't change the gender designation, did I still want to move forward with changing my name designation on there? And I thought that was pretty insulting. Yes, I sent all this stuff to you with the intention and knowing the entire time you're probably not going to change the gender designation, and at least I can change the name designation. Yes. Otherwise, why would I have sent any of this to you? It was pretty insulting. And maybe that's really not how she intended it. I'm not sure on her end. But that's, the way that it felt. Yes, of course, I would still want to do this. For me, one second here. So for me, my parents gave me a name when I was born, and I've had a lot of issues with my parents without going in depth about that subject. So yes, changing my name is still something on a birth certificate, is still something that I would want to do, even if you can't change the gender designation. I think that children are more so whatever names they want to call themselves or they feel they need to call themselves. And the same is true of adults. And that it's very validating to be able to change your name when you had abusive parents and to be able to say, that's not who I am, the name they gave me, the designations they tried to give me, the way of life they tried to teach me, none of this is me. And so by, getting rid of that name designation, I, on some level, in my own mental capacity, feel like I'm getting rid of that baggage also. And that I'm more validified to be who I am, not who some parents told me I was supposed to be, not even what they said I was supposed to be called, but I am me, myself, independent, and have survived all of this time, much of the time without proper parental help, or I would just say very quickly, without proper parental understanding. It's people that never, in the case of abusive households, they never really wanted to understand their child, right? They just wanted them to be a certain way. So on that note, I'm happy that they're at least changing that. That's something positive, I could say, but it still feels like a slap in the face. And, I told her this on the phone. What really bothers me about it is when they, as the federal government, or they, as someone that's anti-trans, tries to target people like me, well, it's going to be pretty easy. It makes their job even easier. They can look and see that the birth certificate doesn't have the gender designation that the driver's license does, because in Oregon, I was able to get them to put female on there. So there's inconsistency there. And whatever algorithm is running that, they're immediately going to be able to isolate my name, my identity, and say this person is trans, and it will be easier for them to target me. And on the reverse of this, like my argument will go like this on the reverse end of it, what does it really do for the state of Wyoming? They don't get to make as much money when it comes to changing a birth certificate. Number one, they're not making enough money, as much, not enough, but as much, right? Number two, I just feel like it doesn't really do anything other than make me more susceptible to targeting, making me feel ridiculed by the state I was born in. It makes them feel happy as the lawmakers, as the people who did this, when they're able to say no. That's about all it does for them. So what does it really do? At the end of the day, I feel like it just allows some people to sit in a corner and laugh about the stupid trans people that they don't want to admit exist. So it allows them to be beguiling in some way, to get off on the fact that they get to deny someone something. What kind of rule regulation is that really? It punishes me. It's making them make less money. And at the end of the day, you get to sit here in your ideology and, you know, your own cemented belief and somehow feel like you're better or you're superior or you gotta, you know, wow, you really stuck it to that trans person this time. You know, you really made sure that they, you know, definitely could never be themselves, and, you know, you let them be targeted, basically. Wow, good on you. Wow, such good Christians in the state of Wyoming, as I'm guessing many of these morons must be. So the other thing I want to focus on is, you know, the emblem, the motto, the mascot, basically, of Wyoming is a cowboy, is a white man upon a horse. I'm part Sioux and I'm part Assiniboine. And that this is the state I was born into, that I'm forced to have to deal with just because I was born into that shit, pisses me off to no end. You know, it is not a state I at all have any resonation with, as you could probably imagine. It represents in its mascot the antithesis of what it means and what it is to be an indigenous native individual. It basically thumbs right into the indigenous person's face that we are settlers, we did conquer this state, it is ours, and we get to have it and do with it what we please. Look at our mascot if you don't believe us, or if you don't believe me and what I'm telling you. So nothing could be more insulting, I think, as a state that I'm born into, and that this is what I'm forced to deal with. And, you know, I don't have any loyalty to this country. You know, I used to feel pretty loyal to it and that I would do anything for it. And then I served a pandemic line, risked everything for it, and then came back out of all of that. And I haven't been able to rest easy since I did that arduous task. And I've just been dragged around with a bunch of different things that are unacceptable, you know, and I wasn't given any greater opportunity for the great risk that I took on behalf of this country. And, you know, and that's the unfortunate reality of this country, is that I'm just one person. There's many other people like me in this capacity. They don't feel as loyal to this country because they went abroad. They risked everything. Maybe they lost some of their friends. They came back. They had to fight with the bureaucracy, the government, just to get things that they should just have. And I would agree with them that they deserve to have something better, just like I think I deserve to have something better after risking everything. And so what tends to happen in some cases, they lose loyalty. They're not going to risk everything again for a country that won't even risk everything for them, that won't reciprocate what they've done on some level. And maybe they still feel a great sense of duty and service, just they don't really feel it to the country at large. Maybe just people in it that they can find respectable and things of that nature. So it could have been this individual would have fought with everything they had with absolutely, and I mean that, everything they had. They would risk it all for the sake of this country. And now it will be that I would never do it again. And that I know that the country will never do it for me, apparently, let alone other people, that I would agree that if it's a service member, they were a combat veteran, they went through all of this, well, they deserve it even more than I do. Not that I think we should compare the two. One is a civilian, the other is a warrior that went abroad in the world and did stuff. But I would say they deserve it even more, and they don't get it either, where they should really get it, right? So, on that point, I feel yet another point of contention of, many that I've had, where I don't feel loyal to this country, and here's why, and here's how. And, it's not like I'm just pulling hatred out of my rear end. I'm not really a hateful person, exactly. I think that love and hate are two sides of the same coin, and that apathy is the opposite of love. But at the same time, I'm not here trying to overly hate upon people. But when I see injustice in my life or in this country, you're going to hear about it, and I will call it out for what it is. And so the reality is that I feel more like I was born from this land, and that I just so happen to be in the midst of the settlers that rule here after a genocide. And I know in my heart of hearts that my people, the Sioux tribe, the Assiniboine tribe, they would have no problems with this. That to the indigenous people, it goes way back since they knew they had different genders and people that were represented in different ways than what they were just born and appeared as. And they don't have any problem with it. So I know without a shadow of a doubt, if I was in a tribe and I had some birth certificate or something in it, they wouldn't have a problem with changing that designation. And I know that it's only when you have settlers and white people that come here with imperiality and conquest in mind and dirty tricks being the only reason they won that war against my people, that then you have a group of people that will force viewpoints on others and force them to be designated a certain way. And if you didn't have the white settlers here and their atrocities, then I wouldn't even have half of the things I'm bitching about to bitch about. So much of what I'm complaining about is that it's a white settler society that even in the contemporary hasn't had accountability about what it's done to my people and how it continues to treat them moving forward. And so nothing could be more of an insult, like you should be able to look past your rules and regulations and realize that I was just born into them and I'm more native that I'm ever going to believe in your rules, orders, and regulations. And I believe that there's a natural order here. There's a roundedness, there's a circle of life. And by following these rules, orders, and regulations of the white man, we don't follow, if you want to call them the rules, the orders, the regulation of the circle of life, of the ecosystems and what they demand and what we need to do to sustain them. And so I would summarize and just say that your rules, orders, and regulations are the death of this ecosystem. So they aren't even really rules, orders, and regulations. As someone that's part Indigenous, the Indigenous part of me would tell you, if you aren't assuring in your rules, orders, laws, regulations that you are having proper respect for the ecosystem and the land here, then your rules, orders, regulations violate the rules, orders, regulation of the circle of life itself. And it doesn't matter how much you want to sit here and tell me rules, orders, regulations, have to follow them. You can jump off that cliff on your own. I would not be there. And it gets even worse. I mean, you have an administration that is raking up whatever land it can from the indigenous people, whatever court battle it can win, whatever it can push through Congress so that it can have more of this land and have more of a power grab. So I most assuredly will tell you I am more Native American or Sioux and Assiniboine than I'm ever going to be a citizen of the United States of America. And all you have to do is look at your own country, our own country, and realize that that's why I feel this way. You know, in other words, if they actually, as the white man, the settler, make better of these grave atrocities committed against my people, then I would be more merciful when it comes to this. I would be more able to look the other way and say, well, at least they're learning their lesson on some level. Instead, I cannot do anything. And to the contrary, I have to look even more sternly and more scrutinizingly at the white people, the settlers that want to continue to do this. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the state of Wyoming could shove it. I just so happen to be born into some state that you put me in some net rule, order, and regulation. And once again, the reality is I was born from this land. I don't own this land. I come from the land. I don't, you know, come to the land to take from it unnecessarily. I was born from it, and I respect that, and I understand that relation more than many white settlers are ever going to comprehend. My real birth certificate is with my Sioux and Assiniboine people. Had the settlers not come here and tried to destroy our way of life, and I don't get any recognition of that from the state, from the federal government, you know, they don't respect it. Why should I respect them? Why should I respect, you know, in this regard anyway? Why would I have respect when you've loftily disrespected me, my people, my ancestry, what they believe? And so once again, in this respect, you know, this is what my people believe, that there are multiple genders, not even just male, female. This is what my people believe, that a shaman can become anything, including a woman instead of a man. And then I guess I'll just expand a bit on this idea that we'll look at it more from the perspective of the country itself, not the country I'm from, right? So, you know, the country was founded, they experimented with a confederacy for a period of time. A confederacy means each state is like a country unto itself, and they get to have their own rules, orders, regulations. Do you understand where I'm going with this already? And so they experimented with that. They said this didn't work as well as a federalist government. And now that we've experimented with that, we're not going to do a confederalist government. And they said we're going to have a centralized government. It's only going to have so much power. But in the totality of the country, the federal government will make sure, the centralized government will make sure that we, the people, and our rights are respected. And so then we fought a civil war about this, and the Confederates had an upswing and they had a new movement, right? And they said, look, we think that a Confederate arrangement is better. We think it's better if each state is its own country and there's no centralized government that has jurisdiction over all of it and protects the rights of everyone in the Union. And they lost that bitter, terrible, bloody war. They lost it terribly. And so even though they lost that war in the contemporary, they refused to give it up. They didn't respect what Lincoln really offered them in all magnanimity and all forgiveness in that Christian sense. Being as Abe was, he let his enemies sit at his table after that horrendous, terrible war, and he said, I forgive you. You can have life, liberty, and your property back. And you can begin to live according to the new ruling here that we won the war, you lost. As long as you respect that the slaves have freedom, as long as you respect this, then you can go ahead and continue to be at my table. You can go ahead and continue to have your state as such. And so because of in my view, this grave error of forgiveness. Like, sure, I agree that it's good to be merciful where it's called for. But again, what the Confederates did is they had a heyday with that. And so now we've reached the point we're at now, where we have an upswing in a Confederalist movement. Again, it's not going to outright call itself a Confederalist movement. It's entwined in a bunch of different groups and apparati, right? There's the KKK folded in there somewhere. There's this, there's that. But at the end of the day, you know, many of the Confederates were white supremacists, right? So it just kind of goes about face. Yeah, of course this would be the case. And so they're not going to call it that. But now what we have is just what they fought for in the Civil War, just what the forefathers experimented with and said, look, this doesn't work for America. We have more of a Confederacy. You know, just think about it for 5 seconds. Depending on which state a woman is in, she may or may not be able to have an abortion. She may or may not die today. Depending on what state I live in, I may or may not be able to change my gender designation on my birth certificate. Depending on what state I live in, I may or may not be able to do X, Y, and Z. And why is that? Think about it for 5 more seconds. Because there isn't as much a federalist centralized government that is protecting our rights as citizens. And it's just different states that are allowed to have different rules, orders, and regulations. So I would turn around to Wyoming and say, look, you don't honor and respect the rules, orders, and regulations written in the Constitution that say you have to respect people as they are and how they wish to be seen, not how you wish to see them. So I don't care whatever you think your rules, orders, and regulations are. The forefathers wouldn't agree with this. I don't agree with this. The way that this is arranged is not America as the forefathers envisioned. It's far from it. It's a heavy misstep in a wrong direction, away from it. And it's stepping even further away now. It didn't matter that Confederates lost a horrendous, bloody Civil War. All that matters is the state gets to have its own rules, orders, and regulations apart from those enshrined in a constitution. And so even if I wanted to say there's some value in the fact that this is the United States of America, even as an indigenous native person, I can barely find it. I barely even have it. Why even call it the United States of America when there is no unity among the states? Different states feel that this is appropriate and a different state doesn't. There is no unity among it. And it's more of a confederacy than it's ever been, you know? So what should we call it? The Confederacy of America, that's trying to act like it's a United States, but it's a united union. You know, let's get real with ourselves here. We have fallen far, far from the ideals of that document. And while it's not a, you know, clandestinely perfect document, and while I wouldn't expect that the country would be able to fully own up to that and fully actualize it, this is even worse than the forefathers could have envisioned, right? So again, the whole point of that is I can't even look at the country as a citizen and not even an indigenous native and find value in that, really. But yeah, I guess I'll just speak on this for 1 second. You know, just because I was born with certain genitals doesn't somehow give you the right to tell me that I'm always a man as far as when I was born. Plenty of children will tell you, while I was born this way, I don't feel that that represents who I am. That's not, it doesn't feel right to who I am. And even as adults, and you can't make this argument that they've been brainwashed by someone else at that point. Here's how I feel, you know? And so what right do they have once more to do this? Because let's look at it from the standpoint of biology. It is not as clear cut and straightforward as the man has these chromosomes, the woman has these chromosomes. There are plenty of incidences, if you study biology, where it's a man, but they don't have those chromosomal expectations out of these people that try to have an argument to, prop themselves up and say, this is why you don't get to have this designation on your birth certificate. Science doesn't actually support these conclusions. To people that actually are impartial and try to study what science is actually saying. And even beyond that, some women are born hermaphroditic. They have, a pair of junk down there. Some, like, again, how you define a woman is not as straightforward as you want to believe. I've read a fascinoma where some women are born with uterine tissue in their nose, and every time they have a period, they bleed from their nose. Some women are born without uterine tissue. Are you going to sit here and tell me that all of these people that were born biologically women are also not women? Because that's the argument that you're trying to make, and you'd have to go the full step with it and say, okay, well then, yes, this is really what I think. And so then it's not just invalidating trans women, you're trying to invalidate women in general. And it's very stupid and dumb. And I guess I'll go into like a full argument as to why this annoys me from the Christian kind of vantage, and then I'll just kind of be done. I don't really have much more I have to say here, but let's look at something like the goddess Pluto. Initially, it was a goddess, right? Initially, Pluto was the goddess of the above world, and she had ever-flowing fertile breasts to nourish all this life before her. And then a patriarchy, men came along and they said, I want to have a patriarchy. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make her transition from a woman into a man. And I'm going to have Pluto go underground. And instead of being this fertile mother of all of the above, she's going to be the king of shades down below. And she's going to transition. Again, Pluto is trans, basically. We're going to make her a he. And we're going to do this to so many goddesses that existed in the matrilineal times. We're going to turn it all on its head and say, no, it was always just a man. It was always a male deity. We're going to cover it all up. We're going to make sure no one knows this in the future if we can help it. And, the rest is kind of history. And so, so much of the basis of this anti-trans rhetoric and this issue with trans people is Christian, which is the only reason I'm mentioning this. If it wasn't in a Christian foundation of anti-trans, then I wouldn't be saying any of this, and it wouldn't matter to me as much. But since they want to make it all about Christianity from their vantage, that's what I have to talk about. Again, I'm not just trying to attack something just to attack it. Maybe they should have thought to not attack people like me first and respect who we are, and then I wouldn't have to do it, right? So the way I see it, as you could probably imagine here, is that they take great issue with someone like me who transitions from a man to a woman. But in their terrible ignorance, again, most of these people don't even understand what I just said. In their terrible ignorance, they don't understand that their religion, the way it was founded, is guilty of the very thing you're trying to condemn me of and for. The only reason it was able to get to this point is because it tried to transition female deities, female goddesses, women into a more masculine, patriarchal view of everything. And so, in the words of the Jesus Christ that they follow, good teacher, by the way, what would he say about that? He would say they're hypocrites, no better than the Pharisees, yet they claim to be followers of me. And I would say he's probably righteously pissed about that, isn't he? And so, yeah, just to kind of close it out and be done with it, you know, they didn't have any problem back in the day. And even some of the people in the contemporary, they don't have any problem transitioning someone from female to male. They'll take them to conversion therapy now. They took Pluto to conversion therapy in the ancient times. They have no problem with it. But when someone's a man and they want to transition to female, or something is more male and it wants to become more female, they have so much problem and so many issues with it. And they want to sit here and condemn it and have so much problems with it, yet they want to say that they're non-judgmental Christians and that judgment is for God. Well, then, if that's the case, maybe you should have saved it for this God. Because the reality is that you are judging, and you have judged trans people, and you will continue to do so, it appears, across time. And the only recourse you leave for people like me who are native as well as trans is something like Wakipi Wanagi, right? It's when the white people try to take away the dances of my people, and we started to lose our dances, which was basically a motion representation of our way of life, you know, an energetic way of expressing our way of life. They try to take it from us, and so now we have been working as the native to take away their dance, their way of life. And if they had never at first glance tried to take away our way of life, then we would never even bother or imagine to ever, you know, as a Christian would put it, judge them in this way and try to cast it upon them and, you know, throw the stone back and say, look, you threw this stone at me and it's never going to happen. It's never going to fly. Yet they continue to try to throw their stones at people like me and say that they're in good faith, such good Christians when they're not. Thank you.